Oh, we are live. I'm not paying close enough attention. So, this is Sleepy Reader here. I'm doing a live hangout with one of my absolute favorite podcast hosts, masterminds, Eric from Longbox Review.
Mastermind. I'll take it.
My new name for you. I got tired of calling you the Podfather.
The Podfather. I like that too.
He's only the Podfather in that he inspired Matt and I to do a podcast. I suppose we could convert this and put this. I'd have to ask Matt if it would be okay to put this also on the podcast. But I invited Eric here to talk with me about DC because I have pigeonholed him as a big DC fan. And I've been thinking a lot about DC lately. And so we're going to talk about maybe a little bit about DC's past, about where it is right now and where it seems to be going, just in an informal chat. So yeah, Eric is, the way the YouTube works, I believe, is only one of us shows at a time. It would be nice if it showed us both on a split screen or something. So when Eric is silent, he doesn't show up. And when I'm silent, I don't show up.
Okay.
So we already have one person in the chat, Omnitron. Whoops, I just covered up Omnitron's chat. He says, "It is the Omnitron. I can only say I love Gail Simone's Plastic Man right now, and most of the other titles. So I'm actually on an upswing of my DC love. But maybe we should start, like, one question that we were just starting to delve into before we went live is DC Rebirth over? It seems like it's over, I guess. I don't know. It's not officially over.
Yeah, the whole DC reboots, and I showed Damien a list that I wrote down just of my notes before we started. But you know, we had Crisis, then we had the post-Crisis DC universe, and then we had Flashpoint,
right?
Flashpoint / New 52, right? And then they did this weird thing called Rebirth, which is still New 52, but with some changes.
The theory was that because, well, presumably Dr. Manhattan had fiddled with the universe, that now we could bring back any part of DC continuity post-Crisis, I assume, that we want. And we saw a little bit of that, I guess, for a while, but now it's hard to tell if we're seeing very much of that.
Well, yeah, and Rebirth seems to me, I look at it, it's a bit of a retcon of New 52. So then, right, you know, we're playing with that whole reboot, soft reboot, retcon, whatever terminology you want to throw at it. But I think we're just in this weird post Rebirth excitement,
right?
Which now that happened
3 years ago?
Has it been 3 years?
I think so. Or has it been 2.5?
I was thinking about just over 2, but I don't recall exactly.
Well, I remember you and I in September 2 years ago were talking about the beginnings of Rebirth. So I think it started. Yeah,
okay.
I think you're right. A little more than 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty quick for it to kind of fade away in a way. And,
well, but has it faded away? You know, because
totally.
They took away the branding,
yeah,
for sure, and they're just telling stories. But beyond that, I think, like I said, we're in this kind of post-Rebirth weird soft reboot thing because they just did the Dark Knight's Metal event, and jumping out of that was pardon the pun, a rebirth of Justice League titles and some reshifting of things. And as you're holding up there,
the new age of heroes, which is actually labeled Dark Knight's Metal under the DC universe there.
Yeah, that was weird to me. But yeah, we get a bunch of new comics, a bunch of creative teams shifting around, most notably on the Justice League titles. Because now we have not just the Justice League title itself under new creative control, but we have the Justice League Dark, Justice League, what is it, Odyssey?
Right.
Which
Justice League Odyssey.
I don't think I've read that yet.
Has it come out yet?
I I don't
It may
know.
not have come out yet.
I know it's coming. I just don't know what's going on with that. But
And we got this sort of Bendis verse of Superman all of a sudden.
exactly,
So we have all
yes.
these things going on, and it seems diffuse, maybe. Like there was a moment in Rebirth where the whole universe was perhaps supposedly under one overarching story. And now there's kind of the metal stuff is kind of an excuse for a bunch of stories. Like with the Justice League Dark, they exist because the source wall has changed something about magic, and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a plot MacGuffin, the whole metal thing.
Yeah, and then you get holding up Titans. You know that also came out of Dark Knight's metal,
Oh,
right?
does it? Okay, I've been
Because
following.
this is kind of a fourth Justice League title in the sense that you have a bunch of Justice League related characters dealing with a particular after effect or result of the source wall issue.
Right.
But it's not, to me, it's not a Titans book. It's a weird, it's like Justice, what was it? Justice League Task Force. It's more like that for that
So
book
it's
from the
more
90s.
just a sub Justice League book.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, Omnitron said, I think the second we get the JSA officially back is when Rebirth is over. I would like to get them back, though. To me, and he also says, to me, the issue Rebirth had, as in the trouble it had trying to get rid of the New 52, is like if post-crisis tried to backtrack 6 years into its existence and go back to the pre-crisis universe. So it is this kind of universes laid upon universes, and somehow you want to line them all up. And it's hard to do that. To me, the other issue is that Rebirth was introduced very well by Jeff Johns in a one-shot that implied that the story was going to be continued relatively soon. And instead, we got little dribs and drabs. We got the button, and now we have Doomsday Clock, which I am not reading, but I'm following what people are saying about it, and it sounds like it hasn't got anywhere near to bringing us back into that storyline yet.
Yeah, I am reading it. It's a bit bizarre because we're now, I think the 7th issue was just released. I'm actually getting it next week, I think. And what I've heard about that 7th issue is that they're finally starting to touch on some of the multiversal aspects going on with it. But so far, the first 6 issues have just been, oh, we have this interdimensional crossover between the Watchmen universe and the DC universe, with some characters going back and forth, or at least coming to the DCU. And that's been about it. It's just been this weird, I don't know, it's a weird thing that had it come out perhaps more on time, more timely,
Right.
maybe that could have kept up that momentum, that excitement about whatever it was they introduced at Rebirth. But here we are, 2+ years later, this year-long thing has yet to conclude. And
timing is really the problem here. If there had been something within the first year of Rebirth, I think, that tied everything together and gave us a spine of how to understand Rebirth properly, and then all the other writers could have built on that, instead of them kind of, I feel like some writers have had to sort of stay in neutral as they wait for Jeff Johns to see what he's going to do or something. And meanwhile, Jeff Johns kind of, his position at DC changed, so I don't know if he has as much influence over things anymore. Maybe he has more or less. I really don't know, but I know his title changed. He's certainly not in charge of the movies anymore. And I think he's going to get his own label, his own pop-up label.
Yes. Yeah. Travis and I have talked about that on my show, about his label and what he named it. And the name escapes me now, but it doesn't engender a lot of goodwill on my part.
It had a very negative kind of title.
Yeah, it was a very, the Killing Zone. I think that's the phrase that's popping in my head.
That could be it.
And I know, Jeff Johns has that reputation about killing characters off, much to certain people's chagrins, mine included. But so yeah, I not excited about this. I will say too that speaking of that kind of darker tone. I mean, Doomsday Clock for certain has a much darker tone than the tone of the comics that are coming out month to month, or
Right.
twice a month in some cases. That's currently being published by DC. So it's I don't know. I don't know about you, Damien. The older I'm getting, the less I want to see of this dark and gritty crap that keeps reinvading comics,
I agree.
especially DC.
And I was really liking Rebirth because it did have a bit of a lighter tone, especially
Mhm.
compared to some of the New 52. Um, with variations between different comics, which is great. It's like when everything has a dark tone, I'm particularly unhappy about that.
Yes.
So, well, but I am actually feeling. I feel like the main part of DC is continuing in a fun tone, and I am having quite a bit of fun. Um, so, if you don't mind, I'll mention some comics that I'm enjoying right now by DC.
Yeah.
And one that's kind of standing out at the moment is Hawkman,
Yes.
with really amazing art by Brian Hitch. It's really bringing me back to Brian Hitch. It's been a long time since I've really been super excited over Brian Hitch, maybe just out of over familiarity. But he's having a lot of fun drawing this wild roller coaster ride of a story that Vendetti is writing for him.
Hmm.
So it feels like kind of a star turn for an artist in a good way, without it being over about too much about the artist's ego and not about story. There's still a good story there, but it's letting the artist sort of go wild with his imagination at the same time.
See, this Hawkman is a perfect example of what I thought they were trying to accomplish with the New Age of Heroes books, which is artist driven, however you want to define that. I think DC maybe didn't really define that well for themselves. And
Yes.
and that's why we got because I read most of those New Age books and spotlighted the ones I read. And
Yeah, there's an excellent series of podcast episodes that people should check out where you spotlight the first issue of a lot of those
yeah, and it
ones.
was just this weird eclectic mess for the most part. The only two that I've stuck with, and really only one of those I think has any kind of real potential, is Terrifics. The other one is Sideways, and I'm only sticking with Sideways right now because of the Grant Morrison connection
Ah,
with the
yes.
Seven Soldiers of Victory. That storyline, there's an annual coming out very soon,
And Morrison is
featuring
co-writing the annual, I
and
believe.
yes, exactly. He's co-writing it. That's I think was it Damien, did you and I talk about this when we were at Rose City Comic Con about the Sideways is probably only going to last up to issue 12 for us, or
Right. Well, I thought all of these are about to be canceled. I know some of them
oh,
already are slated to be canceled at like
yeah.
issue 6 or something. I think the new Challengers is slated to be
Hmm.
canceled already. I saw something in DC Nation on their checklist where it said final issue
Oh, okay.
for that. And I feel like there's a couple others I heard were already canceled. I'm hoping. So I just last night, you probably haven't gotten Terrifics number 8 yet,
No.
but it was really good. So the last 2 issues of Terrifics with Dale Eaglesham as the artist, maybe finally they found an artist who can work with this artist first system better. So it's been these last 2 issues of the Terrific has finally clicked for me.
Oh, you
Um,
haven't been enjoying Doc Shaner when he's done some issues?
I like Doc Shaner in general as an artist, but I didn't think the story was any good in those issues. Did
Oh,
you?
okay.
I mean,
Well,
I'm
yeah,
not
the Terrifics is kind of a weird thing because this whole contrived notion of them having to be together,
right.
I don't think really works story wise, and so the characters aren't meshing. In other words, and we're already now 8 issues in. I only have up to issue 7,
Yeah.
and they're still not, I don't know, gelling. And so while that is a specific narrative choice you can make, to evoke, I guess, Fantastic Four, as they've been trying to do with that particular book, it also, you run the risk of alienating your readers.
Right.
And I think for me, that's the problem. It's not the adventure that we're getting in the book, because I think that's gonzo sci-fi type stuff that they're trying for. And I agree with you. Eaglesham is a highly qualified artist to evoke that kind of um, feeling in me. So that's good. But given the, I don't know. I mean, this book it's not being published twice a month like some of the other
Right.
DC comics, right? But we have had several different artists on this
I think
already.
I think Eaglesham is the fifth. The
Is it
fourth
really
or
the
the fifth
fifth one?
artist.
Wow, that's crazy.
But with issue 8, like I enjoyed, I had hope with issue 7, and with issue 8, I really enjoyed it. But a lot of it was their interaction with Tom Strong and his cast of characters. So that's interesting. I noticed, like with some of the earlier issues, even with Doc Shaner, that the pacing was really off. Like they might start with all the characters sitting around thinking and then have action start on page 6 or something. And if you're going for that old Fantastic Four feeling, you have to sort of explode on the splash page and then maybe backpedal to some character moments as the action gets moving, which we are getting more with Dale Eaglesham. So, and it might be that they changed the way of doing it. Maybe finally Lemire has more control of the boat, or maybe Eaglesham is just a better pacer of stories than the other artists were.
He's particularly good. I want to bring this back around to where we started with this with Hawkman, though. So that was my point. It's like
right. That was your point.
Hawkman seems to be the realization of what I think were attempting to do with New Age of Heroes. But that could be, like you just said, that could just be that Hitch is just a phenomenal artist. I mean, his visual sense is almost unparalleled, I think, in the way that he draws panoramics, location shots. It's just incredible. And then he does some really cool designs.
He does really cool designs. It's very well colored too, which helps. And he seems to love the aerial balletics of Hawkman, I think.
Yeah. He and Venditti, I think, are really creating a Hawkman for the ages here. And I don't know. I am totally in love with this book. I did a focus on it on the first issue not too long ago myself, and boy, I have rarely been as excited about a particular new hero book as I was Hawkman. So I'm all for it, and I highly recommend people pick it up and read it. Go buy it so they keep going. So I can be happy.
Hey to Comics with Bueller. Hi to Samuel Trejo. 2 other people have joined us, along with Omnitron in the comments. Omnitron says, I wish Doc Shaner was the artist on the upcoming Shazam. Is Eaglesham the artist on that?
Yes.
So he'll be leaving Terrific soon if Terrific doesn't just go away. Eaglesham will be good on Shazam too, but Doc Shaner would be wonderful on Shazam. Hopefully they're smart enough to bring him in whenever Eaglesham goes away.
Yeah, maybe Eaglesham and Shaner should be like the tag team duo at DC.
That would be great, like 3 issues by each. So, so we both love Hawkman, and there should be more DC comics like Hawkman. But the Terrifics, if it continues and continues to get better, has potential to sort of be on that realm. There is a really, well, you don't like Word Balloon, the podcast, but I don't think you like it. I've heard you complain about it.
I listen to it, depending on who he's interviewing. But yeah,
a week or 2 ago, there was a great interview. I haven't finished listening to it, but at least part of it is great, with Brian Hitch.
Yeah.
And he mentions that he and Venditti had been talking about Hawkman for a while. So I think they met each other. So there may be a friendship there that helps this, or a professional relationship that helps this be a good book. And it's not one of the ones that's officially artist-led. But I'm guessing, since he's a star artist, he might have asked for Venditti as the scripter.
Well, it's definitely a good pairing, however it came to be, because then I think, because talking about favorite books, I mean, this is no longer around, but the Green Lantern Corps book that Venditti was writing that just ended, a month or 2 ago, I think, that was fantastic. In fact, that was probably, that was my top 3 DC book, one of my top 3 books from DC. at the the entire run of that Rebirth title.
Yeah.
So having him go on to Hawkman was just like, I will follow Venditti wherever he goes, because he's just a phenomenal writer.
Yeah. Yeah, DC should hang on to him and maybe give him shine a little more of a spotlight on him. They kind of kept him in the background. They don't talk about him so much.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. See, I wish he would have taken over Justice League.
I have, with Scott Snyder stuff, I kind of wait for trade. If Venditti were on it, I would jump on it. So what are your other favorites right now? Or is there only one other favorite?
Well, it's kind of a, where's my book? I guess the obligatory, I have to say, Batman, the Tom King Batman. I just had, this is my most recent issue. I know that 55 came out, and there's some big thing having to do with Nightwing.
Right. And you tend to be 2 weeks behind because of the way you order your comics.
Yeah, I'm usually, yeah. So we talked about this on a recent episode of my show, You, Me, and Matt, for the Rose City Comic Con wrap up, and we had a very
kind of
interesting
attacked you about Batman. Yeah, drunkenly.
But that's okay, because
but you're loving Batman, and that's great. I mean, to me, actually, Matt hates it absolutely, but I just found it so uneven that I decided to take some time off and read it when Tom King's done. Read his whole run or something.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfectly good way to experience it. I'll take exception. Maybe we should talk about this at some point down the road, but I think it's been pretty even. I'm not sure where you're coming from with that, so I'm very curious about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I've probably when Matt and I were talking about it in our podcast about it, if you went back there, you'd kind of see where I'm saying some issues work better than others, and maybe I was.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
hopefully, I was
agree with that.
Examples of some issues that really just threw me right out of the. I'm in the story. I'm in the story. Suddenly, I'm thrown out. And the worst example was issue 50, which just really did not work for me and knocked me out right when I needed to be in, if you know what I mean, because that was the special hyped issue. And
I get that.
Long.
Yeah.
But I appreciate Tom King is always sort of playing with the form, and I love that. So that's why I do want to go back and read the whole run.
Well, speaking of that, if you don't mind, there's some stuff in the DC Nation magazine.
Sure.
Number 4 for people following along at home.
Right. If we have time, we were hoping to kind of delve into a lot of that. So what were you thinking about?
Well, I think what you just said leads into this really well. This is the letter from, as it says, DC publisher Dan DiDio. I know he's not a favorite
here.
There you go. He's not a favor of a lot of people. But there's some, there's some things here that he said that I think kind of play into what you just said. And so I'm going to read a little bit of that. As a reader, I found that the stories that hooked me and made me a comics fan always contained great action, adventure, and excitement. But the best and most memorable also contained the character moments and emotional beats that stay with us long after the battle's end. A little bit later, he says, big bombastic stories and character-driven emotional stories aren't mutually exclusive. And later, again, he says, that's what's great about the breadth of the DC universe. You can do a story that's big and loud and noisy, Justice League, but still have the character and emotion at the heart of it, Batman. That's the pure essence of comics. We hope you enjoy that journey as much as we do. So I was curious what you thought of that, Damien.
It sounds great. And
yes.
And because I'm very positive about DC, and overall, I think Dan DiDio has a lot of good ideas, along with some bad ones. And he's, not my favorite writer, but I think that's a great way to put it. There is a lot of big bombast, and there is a lot of emotion at the same time. To me, the best comics combine them well. And keep the story flowing without me stopping and saying, oh, here's the issue where they do the emotions, and here's the issue where they do the action. But I can appreciate it at multiple levels.
Yeah. 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 At face value, I think they're doing that. That's what I mean.
Uh,
There's certainly, I can recognize that they're trying to do this. Uh, the problem, I think, though, is that they let they let certain events, and I mean events that, like, with a small e, not like the big event type thing,
right.
get in the way of that. And I'm looking squarely at DC or Dark Knight's Metal.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm not saying that that was a bad event, that was a bad series, and the fallout from that isn't necessarily inherently bad. I just don't know that it was well thought out. It was
Yeah,
I kind of get the sense, and and if you've ever been to a con and heard and seen Dan DiDio speak, I mean, the guy is just
I haven't.
he's like a bundle of energy, like waiting to explode in front of you. I mean, his excitement for his job and for the products that DC produces is quite evident. And to that degree, I respect the guy, because he's he's kind of like Stan Lee in that he's the guy hucking DC Comics. He's trying
Right.
to promote them to the best that he can, all that stuff. But my just this is just my personal opinion about this. I kind of think they, somebody gets an idea. Whether it's great is up to, people to decide. But somebody came up with the Dark Knight's Metal. I assume it was Scott Snyder, right? And
Yeah.
then, I'm sure, like, DiDio and others at the company are like, "Ooh, run with that. Let's see where they go." And then somehow out of that came the New Age of Heroes books, and with the artist driven concept, and this trying to duplicate Marvel characters and ideas for
Yeah.
some reason, instead of, maybe playing up the DC ideas. Uh, but then you also, out of that, peripherally, you get these. Well, I don't know. I can't say that. I can't say that for sure. But because Hawkman followed all of that, I think perhaps DC is open to trying new things depending on what it is and who's involved. So it would be nice to know. I guess I need to go figure out what the origin of Hawkman was. Was it the writer artist doing this? Was it a result of things coming out of? Well, no, it was. I'm sorry, I was forgetting. They did feature Hawkman in Dark Knight's Metal, and so that was a direct result of that
Right. And his
that event.
awareness of his reincarnations, and
Mm-hmm.
he's now looking at reincarnations off planet and all over the place. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
some of them are in other dimensions, but they appear to be. Um, so your description of Didio kind of gels for me. What this ball of energy that's so excited over things, they get so excited over things, they hype them to the max. Like the New Age of Heroes was all over the place with giant ads everywhere, but then they don't always follow through because they're too excited over the next thing.
Yes, yeah,
And
very,
so it is that kind of hyper child thing, bouncing from one excited idea to another.
yeah, yeah.
It's kind of like they need Dan DiDio to be matched with some like really sober, dull person who's the follow through person,
I thought that was supposed to be Jim Lee.
I suppose. But I don't think I don't have a great opinion of Jim Lee's judgment on things.
Mm,
I think he's obviously good at a good set of skills, both being a businessman and an artist. But I don't know if he's like a great idea man and a great story person.
right. He certainly fits the bill, though, for the more
Stable, right?
stable, level headed.
Yes, as
He's
a
much more
person, you're
quiet
right. You're right. And perhaps
than Dan.
without him, Didio would maybe things would be a lot crazier without Jim Lee. Maybe Jim Lee is the rock that keeps things floating along.
Maybe, yeah, yeah.
Although to me, the New Age of Heroes, I know Didio is very involved with it, but it really smacked of Jim Lee wanting to return to his glory days of early 90s Marvel and then Image Comics, where the artist was everything and writing hardly existed and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it certainly lends it that theory certainly lends itself to Jim Lee's what's that word, oeuvre.
right. And the first round of artists, because I've gone through so many artists, the first round of artists were all people with a very 90s based style, in my mind.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way, but there was a 90s quality to a lot of them.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, we've gotten off track. You were talking about the heart and the bombast. Another favorite of mine that is a lot of heart or psychology or mind is Mr. Miracle.
Yes.
Um, I haven't read issue 11 yet. I have it, but I haven't read it yet. But despite some frustrations of trying to figure out what's really going on, I've really been enjoying the way Mr. Miracle just plays with the elements like crazy. And yet, behind it all, if you've read all the New Gods comics by Jack Kirby, in a weird way, it's faithful to all of it, even though
Hmm.
it comes off as entirely different than anything Jack Kirby would have ever done.
Yeah, that's been a wonderful Tom King, Mitch Gerrard's playing around in the DC universe in that particular fourth world area
Right.
and just kind of turning it on its ear. But like you say, being faithful to the core concepts. And that is always the challenge of anytime DC wants to do some sort of reboot, right? And Rebirth was supposed to be that promise to us as the fans, as the readers, was, we're still gonna play around. I mean, we're for some reason we're committed to sticking with the New 52, but we're gonna tweak it now. Uh, uh, for whatever reason they decided to do that. But still move forward.
So, David, I don't know how to say your name, Blaise. David Blaise points out DC Nation does an exceptional job of getting the hype for upcoming series and the DC universe as a whole. I love that mag, and I do too. For publications hyping up comics, this was the best one in a long time. They really put a lot of work into it. There's stuff in there that even if you aren't interested in hype is still interesting, like breaking down of how a page was done,
Yes.
or what is my job at DC, and all of that kind of stuff is really cool. They've for a free magazine, it's not just some pictures and saying buy this comic. So I feel like DC's doing a lot of the right things compared to, say, Marvel, right? In recent years, in terms of trying to reach out to the fans and trying to, give you something for your money, or give you something free in the case of DC Nation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The one other comic I wanted to highlight that's currently going that I'm really enjoying, and again, I feel a little guilty because I read an issue you won't have gotten to yet. Justice League Dark with issue 3. I had some issues, Justice League Dark was kind of it was a book with a lot of potential, and the potential really got achieved with issue 3.
Oh, good.
So I really loved it. And talk about it containing the big bombastic story and the personal story. We got some really good personal stuff about Zatanna, and then this huge bombastic battle fight and kind of a revelation about Wonder Woman and things like that were really cool. The story, at least this arc wrapped up in 3 issues, but is opening us up for more later to come, and sort of really served as a great sort of beginning of this team. So I'm super excited about that.
Well, that's excellent because I have been lukewarm in my
Right.
response to this particular book, but I've not read 3, but I will admit that issue 2 did improve upon issue 1 for me. So I'm very pleased to hear that it's getting better.
Yeah. So I think all this, you can tell that Tinian loves these characters and he thinks about it a lot. And all of what he was putting into place, I think, is now coming together. I'm not sure why underneath there it says New Justice. Is that a kind of a line demarcating everything in the Justice League family?
Yeah, I think so. Just to say here's the Justice League after Dark Knight's Metal.
What did the Titans say on it? Did it say anything underneath, or did it just have like a Titans symbol or something?
No, it just has the logo.
Uh,
So that's interesting that they decided to do that.
So any other ones you want to highlight or talk about of current books?
Well, there's Catwoman, and really, I only want to highlight that because it's Joelle Jones writing the book, and also in this opening arc, at least, she's drawing it as well. At least
Yeah.
most of it. She didn't do everything here in issue. I have issue 3. There's another artist that did some flashback stuff, but that's kind of typical these days.
Right.
But Catwoman's not necessarily a character that I have gravitated towards over the years. She's a fine supporting cast member of the Batman books,
but not best as a lead character for you.
Yeah, but I also know that Darwin Cook did a run on the character a while back that I heard was excellent. I have the trade. I haven't read it yet, so I shouldn't really say those things.
Meant to read that one.
Yeah, exactly. But Joelle Jones is certainly one of those. And I'm going to say this because it's going to tie into something else I want to touch on later, Damien. But Joelle Jones is one of those creators. She's not just an artist. I have several of her books that she's written and drawn herself. Most notably Lady Killer recently. But if I know she's going to be on a book, I'm going to get it. That's just the simple fact of it.
Yeah.
I don't know about the longevity of this book, though. I'm just really curious.
It's one of those books that's probably just a miniseries till it ties back into the Batman plot line.
Mm.
And I, in my backlash against Batman 50, I dropped Catwoman after the first issue, although I loved the art and I thought the story was fine, but it just felt tainted to me. So again, I'll probably read it sometime in the future. I love Joelle Jones' art, and I thought her writing on Lady Killer, I don't know if you read that, was very good. I sort of suspected that as a writer, she might be hampered by all the fact that Catwoman is subservient to Batman in terms of not as a person, but subservient as a comic book to the Batman timeline and everything.
Yeah. Well, I certainly can see how she is trying to break out of that for that character with this. I mean, because this is a fully realized character with her own life, her own ambitions. Not that we haven't seen that before in the Catwoman character, but boy, I think Joelle Jones has a very distinct and specific view of this character and what you can do with her.
One other, I guess, positive thing I wanted to say about DC before we talk about their future is all the little interesting side things they do, like when they do their Looney Tunes crossovers. I really enjoyed this Porky Pig meets Lex Luthor crossover. I also got the Catwoman and Tweety Bird by Gail Simone. It was less successful, but still fun. And they're having this weird side Batman story with Kelly Jones art, and I can't resist his art.
Yeah.
Hi, Bugaloo. Hi. My daughter just came home. You want to say hi? We're live on the air.
You're live. Yeah, it finally gets me on while it's live.
She's hoping her cuteness factor will improve my views.
I think that would be true.
My cuteness factor will improve the views.
And they have fun with things like Batman 66 meets Archie. They're always doing these fun side things, which also makes me really like
crossover, like the fun kind of crossover.
Right. You and I are reading Supergirl. What do you think of the current Supergirl?
I really like the Supergirl now that the author of the comic has changed.
We didn't like Steve Orlando's run on Supergirl.
Yeah.
And so now it's Mark Andreyko. There's only been 2 issues so far, and
but I have really liked them.
And it has Crypto in it, which has been really great.
Yeah. Also, she's traveling in a spaceship, not
flying through space, which we find it a little unrealistic to be able to fly light years through space, especially when you're powered by the yellow sun.
Yeah, she also has to have this special suit that picks up like yellow sun energy,
right? Can convert the rays of other suns. Yeah. So far we're liking that. It is kind of subservient to the Bendis Superman storyline.
Yeah, no, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Do I have it right here? It's got very nice art by what's his name?
I like this cover, but this cover is
that cover was by a different artist than the interior artist.
Costume. Look.
Yeah, but that costume isn't actually on the inside, which is funny. I love the way Crypto looks by is it Kevin McGuire? Yeah, Kevin Maguire's Crypto is awesome.
Yeah, he draws dogs better than humans.
And they've been doing fun things like Snagglepuss. That's over now, but I ended up really liking that after having some doubts about it when it started out.
Yeah, and so I think Crypto, I was just telling Dad that I think Crypto looks like a white Labrador, so
Maybe a Kryptonian white lab.
Yeah, a white Labrador, if that's a thing.
Okay, so we're gonna keep talking about other stuff you don't know about. You want to go get yourself a snack or anything?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
She was over at the neighbor's house, but then the neighbor had a play date with someone else, a younger kid, so she had to come home.
Well, just to touch on Supergirl, now that I've heard you talk about this, I feel like I missed out on not ordering those issues.
Excuse me a second.
Bouncing the ball live.
If you want to bounce the ball, could you do it maybe in the basement? We might still hear it coming up from the basement. Does Maddie like Supergirl?
No, she's not really been into the super characters. She's been more into the Bat team.
Right.
Harley Quinn's her favorite.
Yeah, whereas Harley Quinn, the comics have a little bit too much of an edge for us.
Yes, yes. She does not
loves
read
Harley
those.
Quinn on the DC Superhero Girls.
Yeah. And the Suicide Squad movie. I think that's really what kind of launched her love of that character.
My daughter's afraid of seeing these live action movies. She's worried about blood and other things.
Yeah.
So she's a delicate flower. Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like DC's kept me going, even though its main superhero line has struggled a bit as Rebirth has faded.
Well, speaking of Supergirl, the 300-pound gorilla in the room, what do you think of Bendis' Superman?
I've just given up on it.
Really? Okay.
It's not bad. It's not great. It's just there, and for me, have you been reading it?
Yeah.
So I gave up on Action number 3 and Superman number 3.
Okay.
I enjoyed the Man of Steel miniseries, with caveats. So I was willing to keep going, and then it really started to lose my interest somehow on Action and Superman. What are your thoughts on it?
From the sounds of it, I probably enjoyed the Man of Steel miniseries less than you did. The Superman focus on the Rogol Zaar thing, I am not liking that pretty much at all. It's the Action Comics title that I'm actually enjoying a little bit more because it's focused more on the Clark Kent character, the supporting cast,
Metropolis, and everything.
Yeah, so I like that.
It doesn't line up with the events of Superman, where the negative zone is either poisoning everybody and all of that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Which was an interesting concept, but somehow the delivery of it didn't grab me very much.
Mm.
So I am a little curious, about the Lois Lane thread in Action, and I like the idea of this cartel of villains, of regular non-powered villains who manage to keep themselves secret from Superman. That's interesting to me, but somehow it didn't grab me, and I'm reading too many other comics. And I loved both Superman books before Bendis started them, so
I think that's the huge problem, was that they were just kicking it like crazy on the previous runs of the Superman books, and then those writer artist teams were kicked off in favor of Bendis coming in because he wanted to do Superman,
right?
And he wanted to work with these artists, right? And I get that. I mean, that happened back in the 80s, post-crisis, with John Byrne,
right? And I think it's happened a lot over the years. Anytime some big person says, "Hey, I'm interested in this," but I think DC, maybe in that overhyped excitement of Dan Didio, made too big of a deal out of Bendis. Bendis is a good writer, but I don't think he stands, as a giant above everyone else. And so I think they should have just treated him as another one of their good writers and looked for the best places to use him.
Okay,
That's my opinion.
I'll have to disagree with a little bit, because I read a bunch of his Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
Daredevil, Avengers, New Avengers especially, Spider-Man, some Spider-Man stuff. I think he does very well with certain characters or concepts. What I'm not seeing, though, is that same skill that I've read over the last 10 years or so when he was at Marvel, and his own work, his own creator-owned work, here with Superman. I'm not sure why that is. And, and just like any artist, and I mean that, actual artists, like the people who draw the comics, their styles change over time, or can change, right? And so that happens with writers as well. And so I think Bendis is simply just trying to find his way in the DC universe. The problem is that he's doing it on, the only other character that he could have taken on that was higher profile would be Batman. And for whatever reason, he didn't want to do it, or DC wanted to keep the team that were on it. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe if he'd done something else, some other character, I don't know. It's hard to say, we're Monday morning quarterbacking here, but
he has just started a Batman story in that Walmart exclusive issue number 3 of Batman. I don't know why they didn't start it with number 1, but so I bought issue 1 and 2 thinking he'd be in there, and he wasn't. And so I have bought issue 3 and I haven't read it yet. And it has art by one of my new favorite artists, Nick Darrington, who did the recent Doom Patrol. So I'm really interested to see that combination.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the collections of those stories.
I'm not saying that Bendis was bad or just another writer on Daredevil and Avengers and Ultimate Spider-Man, but I'm saying that I would guess that when he got those, it was because he was building his way up to those things. He was part of the team. He was not like, here comes King Kong, let's let him sit wherever he wants.
Yes.
And so I think the being treated as that important may not be good for him and not as good for the fans.
Okay, so
creatively, he may be making a lot of money from it.
I'm sure.
Apparently they paid him a lot up front, and now they're regretting it. That was a rumor. Sorry, that was just a rumor from Bleeding Cool, so I shouldn't probably repeat that.
So you're touching on the very thing that I wanted to come to, or come back to. This comics has always had that, and I think perhaps DC more than Marvel, say, has often done this, where, like I mentioned John Byrne earlier, when he took over Superman post-crisis, that was a big deal. John Byrne coming to DC. And so now, flash forward 30 years, 35 years, whatever it is, now we got the same thing with Bendis, right?
Right.
Although I will say, I think John Byrne was much more successful initially than what I'm seeing out of Bendis here.
I would agree. Yeah.
But so you've got Bendis. Right now, since we're talking, post rebirth, or this weird state that DC's in right now, you've got Bendis, you've got Tom King on Batman, you've got Snyder, and I am talking about writers here, so I'm not trying to diss the artists at all, but the focus from DC itself seems to be on the writers for these particular titles. So you got Tom King, you've got Scott Snyder now on the Justice League books. There was and then you also have Jeff Johns in a different tier, but still charting some sort of course for the future of DC Comics via the Doomsday Clock series, right? So what occurred to me was that we have kind of this it's a bit of cult of personality, and I think maybe that's what we're reacting to.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a good thing. I mean, I think it's working out well with Tom King. They are bringing back Grant Morrison again, because I think they're going to be previewing it in every issue this week and maybe the next few weeks. And I think they might preview it in DC Nation also. So I think they're focusing on bringing in the big guns. Marvel maybe is going, part of what Marvel does right now is bring in people who haven't done comics before, like Ta-Nehisi Coates and some other people, and that's kind of their thing sometimes as a way to get hype. But I feel like DC's double downing on top creators with established track records in comics,
And
including the artists too, having Brian Hitch. I think the what's his name, Liam Sharp. They're making a big deal about Liam Sharp on Green Lantern, along with Grant Morrison, and so I'm pretty excited about Grant Morrison really coming back into the DC universe.
Yes, yeah, me too.
So that's one of the things I'm very excited about.
Now, related to that, I mean, I don't know if cult of personality applies here, but you know, in the DC Nation, you have the Wonder Woman announcement. Focus.
Yes,
and with G. Willow Wilson coming over from Marvel,
another
person to do Wonder
who
Woman.
has this now really good track record as a writer.
Kelly Sue DeConnick is doing Aquaman.
That's the weirdest one, actually.
It is really weird.
I wonder what her Aquaman concept is. I would have thought you would use Kelly Sue DeConnick. She's also going to be doing one of these Black Label ones. I can't remember which one she's doing in Black Label. Maybe Wonder Woman. I would think you would use Kelly Sue DeConnick for shorter projects, because I think where she sells really well is in trades. I think she has a huge audience in trades for both of her Image comics. So I think she may be less a celebrity writer amongst the buyers of regular superhero floppies, but I could be wrong in that analysis.
No, I think you're right.
So that's the one I predict won't sell well, just because I don't think the combination of her and Aquaman is going to get that many regular buyers excited.
Or it's a sleeper hit.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll try that one. Will you?
I don't know. I like Kelly Sue as a personality. Every time I see her at a con or I follow her on Twitter, she's an amazing person. What I've read of her work, though, it's hit or miss
right.
for me.
There's something in her writing style that I have a problem with. I think it's not the level of concreteness that I want, or something. To her, I don't know. It's hard for me to put my finger on it, but there's something where I'm going like, this is for someone else when I read it.
Yeah.
And just in terms of its story structure or something.
Yeah.
But it is kind of like, I'll be interested to see what people say about Aquaman, and given my access to tons of shops, if after an issue or two of her on Aquaman, people say this is fascinating, I can run out and get the issues. So I'll be paying close attention to that. But I'm putting Willow Wilson's Wonder Woman on my list right away. I'm jumping on Green Lantern, and I'm already, super excited now. I'm always wary about Brian Azzarello. Sometimes I love him, sometimes I'm totally disinterested. But I've read this first issue of Damned, and just the silly controversy aside, I thought it was a really cool comic, great art, great writing, a slightly different take on Batman that I've seen before. So I'm really interested in this. I think it's only 3 issues, and it's making me more psyched for the other Black Label comics. So it's doing its work.
Well, that's good to hear, because I wasn't sold on the Black Label stuff. Again, going back to how I started this conversation with you, I'm not into the dark, gritty stuff.
Right.
And as much. I appreciate
certain
kinds of stories like that.
If you're not in a dark, gritty mood, don't read this. This is full bore. Let's gritty. But it throws in interesting supernatural touches. Let me say that, since you haven't read it, that I think give it an extra interesting edge. But
Azzarello and Bermejo on doing the book, though, would be a draw for me.
Yeah.
But the fact that they promoted it as more mature superhero stuff is like, I don't know. That's just not what I want to read right now.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty excited about the Black. I feel like I'm going to be dragging you, kicking and screaming, to continue reading DC.
Well, no, you don't have to do that.
I
So
know.
I've been reading DC Comics since 1978, and I there have just been, it's cyclical, right? So sometimes I get like a bajillion books, and then sometimes I get two.
Right.
It just depends on my mood, who's doing what. It's like the Kelly Sue DeConnick on Aquaman. Aquaman's never really been a character I care about, but I would read. There you go. I would read. I would read a good Aquaman story.
Right. I do
If
like
the
the
right
art
writing
here,
team was-
the picture. I'm partially talking so other people can see the picture since it makes it come up.
Yeah.
But I can't remember who Robson Roca is.
I recognize the name, but I can't think of what that artist has
That's
done.
a very good splash page. There's water splashing everywhere.
Since we're throwing out the DC Nation stuff,
Yes.
these are characters from the most recent issue of Sideways that I read, which is I think 7.
So I have to
8.
confess, I've been buying Sideways, but I haven't read it since issue 3. I've been meaning to catch up. So that picture that you showed there has me kind of excited.
And then here's the other page where they show. So I mentioned the 7 Soldiers of Victory, Grant Morrison stuff tie-in. Well, they're also doing these Silver Age characters, new takes on these Silver Age type characters, right? The Red Ant Superman, the Porcupine Jimmy Olsen, the Werewolf Jimmy Olsen, things like that we haven't seen probably.
Yeah, I love that stuff now. I've kind of grown to love it because I hated it as a kid, but
so I love it when DC plays around with stuff like that for sure.
Yeah.
And even I just decried the dark nature of DC right now. It seems the zeitgeist of DC is let's go darker. But even though in that Sideways issue, number 8, where this stuff is introduced, and those character concepts are a bit darker because it is the Dark Knight's Metal. What is it? The Dark Universe? I forget what they call it, but they're still because they're playing around with those Silver Age concepts. It's still fun in a sense.
Yeah. Well, that's why I stuck with Sideways, although I just let it slip because I get too many comics. But even though it wasn't perfect, it felt fun. It had a fun character. Maybe some of the fun was being stolen from Spider-Man, but nevertheless.
Yeah, it's certainly not your mama's Spider-Man.
Maybe they're seducing Grant Morrison to come in and write Sideways. That would be cool. Or if he and Dan Didio co-wrote it.
I tell you what, if Morrison had done Sideways with Kenneth Rocafort as he started out on the art with this book, I think that book would have just exploded. So
that's the one that the artist stuck with it. Sideways. Rocafort was there from the start, right?
I think there have been some other artists in a few issues, but because the art or the book does suffer when Rocafort isn't doing it.
I see.
In my opinion.
I read the interview with Willow Wilson about Wonder Woman, and she didn't really say a lot. And it made me a little nervous. Like she's a great writer, so I still will try it. But I didn't know if she really had a great idea yet. And I think part of the problem with Bendis is, despite all this hype about how I had to read Superman, I don't feel like he has a clear vision of this is my Superman and this is what I want to present.
See, that's funny because I would say he has a very clear vision of what he wants to do. It's just not necessarily
what we want
working with what we think of the character.
Right. Well, to me, it feels scattershot and all over the place. He's got all these elements, and I think he's hoping to bring them all together.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's one of his strengths, though. He does that. He'll present what is potentially from the outside looking in looks like a fragmented story, but then all those things, all those plots and everything kind of weave together in the end, and he really normally can really punch you with a good story.
Well, time will tell, and that again is something I can come revisit someday. I just did not get going from Man of Steel to action to Superman, it didn't feel that consistent to me as a character. But maybe that's just me. So, well, I guess that, it's my excitement is the Black Label, Grant Morrison coming back, G. Willow Wilson, that some of these recent books are starting to get good for me, like Justice League Dark and the Terrifics, if the Terrifics lasts.
Well, I think what DC should always do, what any DC, Marvel, any entity like that, a corporate entity producing entertainment media like this, they need to focus on simply creating good stories. I mean, Dan DiDio basically was saying that in his introduction, right? And not be so focused on the event, the big E event, right? Or the things coming out of the big E events. I would really wish they would not even do the events anymore, and just within the continuity of the books themselves, tell good stories, bring characters in, tie them together somehow, or in whatever ways they want to, but have it happen organically instead of like this. I keep picking on metal. Right. Have this metal thing, and then suddenly Justice League is this entirely different thing now because of the events of that, or the source wall breaking or whatever.
I agree with you 100%, and that I think even if an event is good, it's the fallout from it can often be bad, because then other creators have to pick up on it. They're forced to change directions. I also dislike it when, like, say with Superman, that Supergirl is now subservient to the Superman storyline. She can only act within the limits that Brian Michael Bendis has set out, but another writer has to do that. So that writer does not have freedom to just say what is best for my character. So right now we're having fun reading Supergirl, but she's off trying to solve the mystery of Rogol Zar. And I kind of assume she will only get a piece of the mystery, bring it back to Superman, and Superman will put it all together. And so what she's done will be secondary.
Yeah.
And that's why I dropped Catwoman. And I might have been wrong to do that, but I was worried that she is being forced to work towards something that will bring Catwoman back to Batman.
And how you just described Supergirl is the reason I didn't pick it up, because I was not interested in the mystery of Rogol Zar. I just do not care about that one major element that Bendis introduced to the Superman mythos.
Yeah, he's not a stunning supervillain, and the focus on him was one of the problems. But at the same time, right at the moment, Beatrix and I, or Quacking Duck and I, are having fun flying around in space with Supergirl and Crypto. I mean, that's good kid stuff. So as long as that lasts, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
But as more adult analysis of it, I just wish Supergirl had her own identity more, as a comic book, not as a person. I mean, she has an identity as a person. And Draco so far is doing that well enough.
I want to touch on something else. So, despite what I just said about DC should focus on the characters and telling good stories, something you said made me think there can be, though, an argument for these events shaking things up, that sort of that chaotic nature of things are different now, so we can go tell different stories. So it's more of a springboard or an excuse to try different things. And despite the fact that I think more recently they haven't succeeded for me, I do appreciate them trying instead of just doing the same old month in, month out, for 80 years. They are trying to shake things up, and that's why I do appreciate DiDio's outlook, his energy. Like I said, things don't land always. I mean, there was this story that came out some time ago about the reasons behind Identity Crisis. That depending on who you talk to, it's either one of the best event miniseries that DC has done in the last 20 years, or it's one of the worst. And but based on the information that I read, excuse me, DiDio wanted to make the DC universe a little darker, a little more realistic, a little more gritty. And so I think that's kind of where that started. And so I'm always a little leery when he wants to do things like that. And at least now, maybe they're doing it, within an imprint, the Black Label stuff.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe the Black Label gives them a place to do that stuff.
Yes, and so I can ignore it if I choose to.
Right. And when you're in the mood when you're in a black mood, you can go Black Label.
Exactly. So I like that. I like that they're doing that. I like. Speaking of imprints, labels, they tried the Young Animal experiment with Gerard Way.
Right.
And I thought that was a great idea. Let's do more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, let's have a special label for our really weird stuff. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of different labels. And you have a good point about how sometimes events shake things up in an interesting way, but maybe it's become too much of a shortcut for them. And maybe sometimes they should think about just a event in a single character's life. Like back when I loved Daredevil the most, he had major events in his life that shook up his life, but they weren't universe-wide events. You don't need a universe-wide event to refresh a comic book.
Yeah.
You can have a big event in a character's life, as we all have those in our own real lives, like the birth of a granddaughter or the death of a parent and all of those things that I know you and I have gone through.
Yeah.
But yeah. There was Samuel Trejo asks, will there be a few Black Label books? So it's a max line. So I think Black Label is a place to produce really graphic novels, I think, because those kind of adult graphic novels tend to be evergreen sellers, going back to Watchmen and that. So they bring in, my understanding is they bring in hot writers. They're going to have a Frank Miller one, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Brian Azzarello now, and some others. Let them just do a short project that's adult. I don't know if they'll all be, where did I put it? All be in that oversized format, but this one is only 3 issues. So I assume it's going to come out in a nice trade and will sell hopefully for a long time in the book market. So that's what I think Black Label's about. And they're also going to be starting up soon a real kids label. So where they'll do a kids version of the DC universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see that exactly. That's the kind of stuff I like about what they're attempting to do. It's kind of it might come across as a bit haphazard because it seems like they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, and it's like, well, that doesn't work. Well, we'll move on to something else. But they kind of have to do that with the changing customer base, trying to get into different markets. The book market, I know, is a huge thing that DC and Marvel keep trying to get into. Where other publishers have been a lot more successful. Just the changing times and how when you can go to a movie theater now and watch the equivalent of a miniseries on the big screen with real actors with great special effects, why do you want to read a $4 comic? Twice a month. Well, right. But I mean, the general public is like,
many audiences to serve in a sense.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
The comics that kind of formed a lot of people like us were written to be read by a generation of readers that lasted 3 years.
Right.
And now they have to deal with readers who are reading their whole lifetime. Plus they need to deal with the new readers and the casual readers. And I think it's a very tricky thing. And I think DC is doing a good job of exploring a lot of different ways to attack that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would like to see the main DC universe. Like, I do wish Jeff Johns had finished that project in the first Rebirth issue sooner. I would like to see the main universe be consistent and then have these other labels for the inconsistent things. Like I used to love Elseworlds, but then at the same time, I want to go back to the pleasure of a world where Hawkman and Batman's stories fit under the same roof and it all makes sense.
Yeah. I had a similar thought as well. And, just have one book per title or per character. Right. So you have a Wonder Woman, one Superman, one Batman. And then if you want to tell these other different stories, do a miniseries, do it as an imprint, do Elseworlds, whatever.
Yeah.
So that we get this great variety of characters and stories and that could be successful for us old fogies, newer readers, kids. Why not? So it seems like they're kind of doing that. They're trying to do it. They're trying to figure it out at the very least. So I appreciate that.
I think that's one of my problems with the Dark Knight Metal, because it seemed to want to be both. It wanted to be a separate label, but it wanted to somehow tie back into the regular continuity. I think if they just made it in Elseworlds and left it at that, I would have been a little happier. But you know,
yeah,
it's working out okay. I'm liking some of the stuff, like Justice League Dark, that is supposedly coming out of it. But so, well, I feel good that we're both optimistic about DC.
Yes. I tend not to be okay. I'll let you know a little secret, Damien. I tend to be more of a glass is half empty kind of personality.
Really? See, you hide that well.
Except where it comes to comics.
Oh, okay.
Where I'm very positive and very optimistic about where things could go and or are going. I love, obviously I do a podcast. I talk with people like you. I go to Comic Cons. I read a bajillion books all the time. I got a bunch of stuff in my comic boxes from 35 years ago to now. I love it so much. But I also I'm not as tied to continuity, for example.
Right.
It's not precious to me. It's wonderful. And I know I can always go revisit it. All I got to do is pull out an old back issue or a set of issues and re-experience that through aged eyes. But I don't care that things are different now than they were when I was a kid, because you have to evolve. You have to change. Otherwise, your audience is going to quit following you. And then where will we be if we don't have a DC Comics? I will be a very sad boy.
And I think that's why I like, in my 47th year of reading comics, like DC better than Marvel, because I can't let go of the idea of the Marvel continuity that I knew as a kid. But DC translates easier into different iterations. And
do you think it's because they've all done all these reboots over the years? Is that part of it?
Partially, and because they had a history of their first 30 or 40 years, there wasn't too much continuity.
That's true.
And so their characters gained a mythic status before they gained a human status. And the humanity came later. I like the humanity, but it came later. And so it doesn't feel as bad when there's different versions of Superman as when there are different versions of Peter Parker. Peter Parker seems more specific, and Superman can embody different things at different times more easily, at least for me.
No, I think that's a good viewpoint.
Marvel's still very popular, and I'm glad it is, but it just doesn't work as well for me. So, yeah, and I think that's a problem for Marvel, because their identity was based on this shared universe. DC can kind of use the shared universe when it is a good thing to do, and Marvel feels kind of stuck with it. And when they try to shake free of it, it feels wrong to a lot of the readers, including myself. But maybe I'll get past that someday. And I do read some Marvel, just a lot less than DC.
See, that's interesting. That's a very interesting point, because my very first comics were Marvel comics. I quickly, for whatever reason, gravitated more towards the DC characters. And so
you started reading right when DC was hitting its stride, I think, in the early 80s.
Right before, yeah, exactly.
Maybe you started right before, yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of years before things just kind of exploded for DC. So I don't have that connection as much as, say, perhaps yourself, to Marvel. I mean, I've read a lot of Marvel stuff over the years, but I just don't have that same kind of connection. So it's interesting to hear that viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when I started reading in 1971, I'd read these exciting Marvel comics full of character and texture, and then I'd read a DC comic and it was just about a character solving a problem through a supposedly clever way.
Yeah.
And
there wasn't summation of DC
going on. And then the next issue just started all over with no reference to the last issue.
Right.
And you know, it was okay if I had no other comic to read, but if I had a Marvel comic, I would read that first. And then I think even in the late 70s, you could see a lot of like I think Marv Wolfman, even before he started Teen Titans, was moving over to DC, and a few other Roy Thomas. And so you could see DC struggling to add more character to their characters.
Mm-hmm.
And then it really gelled around the time Marv Wolfman and George Perez came out with the Teen Titans, I think.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, it's also just right now, I think the DC leadership is better than the Marvel leadership that I think a lot of Marvel leadership is hidden from us. I don't think the editor-in-chief is the person making all these weird choices about prices and events and other things as much as it would appear. I think it's forced upon them. Mm. So I think DC has some real people who really care about comics have a lot of control, relatively speaking. So we get more pages, we get better paper cover stock, you know, we get more bang for our buck usually, and the events aren't as painful. But I'd be happy if, you know, there's Marvel fans out there who could totally counter all of these claims of mine.
Yeah.
So I think we'll wrap it up there. Any other thoughts that you wanted to get to that we haven't gotten to?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything that I was thinking about. Oh, no, never mind. I should have talked about this earlier, but so it doesn't really matter now. But I guess just since I bring it up as a comparison to what I'm getting now, which is what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I will be getting. No, I guess 11. I will be getting 11. Whatever monthly or bi-weekly series once Wonder Woman and Green Lantern start coming out. So compare that to what I started out with Rebirth, which was I got, you know, through so many issues, I got all of the Batman related titles, all of the Superman, Wonder Woman titles, all of the Justice League titles, in addition to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other titles that came out after Rebirth started, you know. So, and I got through, you know, at least 2 or 3 up to, you know, 6 or 7 issues of those before I dropped them. So I'm in a, for me, I'm in a weird state. And New 52, I tried everything, at least one issue of everything. And now like I say, I'll be down to just 11 books. So it's
I went through that pattern, but I feel my number of DC books rising up again. Mm-hmm. And with New 52, same thing. For the first year of New 52, I got an enormous amount, and then it slowly dwindled to the point where they did that event comic that allowed them to move to the other coast. I forgot what it was called. Sorry?
Convergence.
At the time of Convergence, I almost dropped most of my DC. And then came back with Rebirth. So
yeah,
I think it's also just gonna always be that way, where it gets good and then you kind of drop off and then it gets good again.
Sure,
I'm just accepting that pattern.
I just hope they don't rely on a Rebirth-like situation to try and drive up sales. That's where they fail.
Right. Well, and Rebirth very successfully, if they're looking at their books, they look at that first year of Rebirth, that first year of New 52, they made a lot of money. So it must be tempting to them. But so I'm hoping this sort of soft redo that they're doing now, where they're just sort of infusing new books in and not dropping everything. And as we said, kind of focusing on these star writers a bit. Hopefully that works for them and they'll be happy with that and they won't, you know, do a total reboot again.
Yes, exactly. That's probably a great way to end the conversation too.
Yeah. Hi, Cammie. We talked about Wonder Woman earlier. We are both looking forward to it too. Oh, Sergeant America's here. So sorry, guys, if you just dropped in. We're about to stop, but there's a lot to listen to on the rewind. Big thanks to Eric for coming on. Hope to do many more conversations, either here or on Never Stay Dead, or wheedle my way into Longbox review episodes again.
Of course. Yeah.
If
Thanks
you
for inviting me.
if you
Fun.
haven't checked out Longbox Reviews podcast, be sure to do that. When I go back and add a description, I will put a link to his webpage for that, because it's got a lot of great content going on there, a lot of different interesting discussions.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Damien.